Good afternoon. My name is Janvi desai and today I am talking about Victorian Age. The Victorian Age began in 1873 when Queen Victoria became the Queen of Britannia, and it continued in 1901. It is called the Victoria Age because Queen Victoria ruled Britain for a long period. These age came after the Romantic Age and before the Modern Age. The Victoria Age was period of great change. Britain was developing very quickly because Britain developing very quickly because of industrialization, scientific discoveries and new technology, railways, education and the growth of cities. But this progress also poverty, child labor pain, poor working conditions, class inequality and problems related to women's lights. Victorian literature reflected all these changes. One of the biggest influence on Victorian society was the industrial revolution. Many factories were built and people moved from villages to cities to find jobs. Railways developed quickly and made travel easier. New machines and technologies changed the way people live and work. They worked for long hours and often received low wages. Poor families lived in crowded areas, and children were sometimes forced to work. Because of these problems, writers started of paying more attention to ordinary people and their struggles. This is one of the main differences between Romantic and Victorian Age literature. Romantic writers mainly focused on nature, imagination, and focused on nature, while Victorian writers gave more attention to society, realism, and social problems. The Victorian Age was also a time of important scientific and intellectual changes. Science started questioning some traditional ideas. One of the biggest example was Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. His famous book on the origin of species was published in 1859. Darwin's ideas created discussion about human beings, nature, religion, and science. Because of these changes, many Victorian people experienced and conflict between faith and doubt. Some people continued to follow other traditional religious belief while because of scientific discoveries. This conflict between science and religion became an important idea in Victorian literature. Education and literacy also increased during this period. More people learned to read and books, newspaper and magazines because a larger audience than before. The growth of painting and publishing also helped writers become popular. Now let's look at some major characters of Victorian literature. The first major characters of realism. Victorian writers tried to present life as it really was. They wrote about ordinary people, families, cities, workers, and social conditions. The second characteristics is social criticism. Writers use literature to show problems such as poverty, child labor, inequality, and poor working conditions. Another important characteristic is morality. Victorian literature often discusses ideas of right and wrong, responsibility, and social behavior. The position of women was also an important subject. Women had fewer opportunities than men. Men showed human struggles, feelings, relationships, and desire for independence. Victorian literature also shows conflict between traditional development, but they also wanted to protect traditional values. The Victorian Age produced many famous writers. Charles Dickens, one of the greatest Victorian novelists, he wrote about ordinary people and social problems. His famous works include Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, Great Expectations, Hard Times, and Christmas Carol in his novels. Dickens showed poverty, child suffering, and class differences. Family, sorry, George Eliot was real name was Mary, and Evans was another important Victorian novelist. Her famous works include Middlemarch and The Meal on the Floors. She wrote about society, humans, responsibility, about society, human relationships, morality, and personal choices. Poetry was also very important. Alfred Lord Tennyson was one of the leading Victorian poets. His poetry deals with subjects such as love, death, natures, faith, and doubts. Some of his important work are in Memorism, Ulysses, and The Charge of Light Bridge. Victorian literature also including differently literary movements. Realism was important because writers wanted to show his life. The novel became the most popular literary form during the Victorian age. Victorian novels could entertain readers and also discuss serious social issues. Many novels were published in serial form, which means that a long story was published in small parts in magazines, newspaper. Readers had to wait for next part, which made the story exciting. That is why Victorian age is still remembered today as an age of chance, progress, and social awareness. Thank you.